So, a couple of nights after Sean was in Los Angeles, I met with him for a little, just kind of a late night dinner at his hotel suite. And we had a conversation. And there were a couple of things that he said to me that really touched me that I thought I might share with you. So, the next face you're going to see is Sean. The 2 points that you shared with me tonight that might be of some use to my Facebook followers. Would you do that one more time for me?
Well, the first point was something that I kind of absorbed from a guy named Naval Ravikant. He's a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, and he's recently become sort of an online self-help coach, but he doesn't make money from the coaching he gives, so the idea is that it's not a scam, because he's not trying to run a business. Anyway, he said something that resonated with me. As I am somebody who struggles with intermittent depression, I think most of us do these days.
Yes.
And I've tried myriad methods for overcoming negative patterns of thinking. And the most successful strategies have been exercise and, healthy living. But in addition to that, there was this idea that he mentioned, which is essentially it's positive framing. I think I mentioned that I was raised in New York, Upper West Side, Manhattan.
Yes.
It's typically a culture dominated by the kind of intellectuals that you think of Woody Allen as a sort of archetype of the culture there. And it's a sort of culture that elevates self-loathing to a sort of an aspiration or a goal. Because if you're not self-critical, it's embarrassing, because it means that you're not paying attention.
If you're not
self-critical. So if you're overly confident and think you're great, for example, it's embarrassing because it's an indication of a lack of insight, a lack of intelligence, basically. So I was raised in a culture that valued self-loathing as a sort of moniker of intellectual achievement, or at least status. It gave you status over people who are too dumb to criticize themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that can only lead you so far. And in fact, even if you can make a career out of it like Woody Allen did, clearly there's a downside, there's a backlash. And we can even see in someone like Woody, as much as I admire him.
Yes.
So the idea is to practice reframing events in your life or thoughts that you have positively, the way you would practice exercise or meditation. Meaning, you would consciously make a choice to attempt to reframe something positively, not because that comes naturally to you or it feels true even, but because you're trying to build a positive framing muscle, the way that you would your abs doing sit-ups, which, I think we all typically associate with a difficult thing to do. It's not fun to do sit-ups, right? So it might not be fun to reframe positively because it goes against your instincts. It might feel embarrassing in terms of your inner dialogue. But you choose to do it not because it feels natural or you even believe it, but you choose to do it because you know if you do it 1,000 times, like you do 1,000 sit-ups, you'll get some gain. Your muscle will grow. And the idea is not to reframe things unrealistically. So if somebody comes up and chops off all your limbs, you're not supposed to immediately be like, oh, well, this is great because. So it's not ridiculous. But there's so many events in your life and thoughts that you have that are subjective, unlike having your limbs cut off randomly, right? Most events are not so obviously tragic. So, for example, Naval gives this example. He says, one of my relatives, I asked them to send me photos of a event we had together, and I expected just a couple of pictures, but instead I received like 1,000 pictures in a Dropbox file or something. And so my immediate instinct was to think, and this is just a superficial example, but the instinct is, oh, why did you send me so many pictures? It's such an annoyance. Like, I just wanted 2 pictures. Like, you can get annoyed at the person. But he uses this as an example to say, or I could say, how nice that she sent me more pictures than I had expected, because now I can select out of 1,000 the best 2 shots, which I wouldn't have been able to do if she had pre-selected them for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives me a level of control and detail that is a gift. Both of those are equally true. The only difference is the latter choice, the latter framing. If you frame things that way 1,000 times a day over several years, what would the effect be on your quality of life versus choosing the negative framing, which is equally true? 1,000 negative frames over several years daily. What would the outcome? What would be the effect on your quality of life of that? And I think we know the answer, because I think most of us, at least in my case, we do negatively frame as an instinct, because we associate that negative framing with we were rewarded for that kind of self-loathing by the culture. I mean, at least in my case, that was true. It was never pretty to see somebody overly self-congratulatory. It was an ugly thing. It was embarrassing for somebody to think that they were great, or to positively frame themselves too much. So the experiment is, how often can we positively frame or reframe things that we might intuitively frame negatively within a subjective, scale? So not unrealistically, obviously, there are some things that can't be positively framed, but 90% of the things that happen to you and the thoughts you have, you're making a choice. And the idea is to cumulatively, compile these positive frames until you have built a muscle the way you would have in exercise, to be stronger and ultimately influence the quality of your life, to be happier. That's the concept.